I would just like to start off by saying thank you very much for having me here today. I am truly honored and privileged to be speaking in front of you all today. And I also want to take the chance to give a special shout out to my family back home who couldn't be here with me today, but they are the people that I pay all my respects to for making me the person that I am. Thank you, Chrissy, for being here as well. I want to speak a little bit about Matone de Chewit, which is my aspiring nonprofit organization and social enterprise. Matone de Chewit means drops of life in 3 different languages, originating from the 3 continents in the world that suffer most from water scarcity. Matone means drops in Kiswahili, which represents Kenya and Africa. De means off in Spanish, which represents Latin America. And Chewit means life in Thai, which represents Asia. And as I said, these are the 3 continents in the world that suffer most from water scarcity. So it takes a child in Kenya an average of 3 hours to fetch 1 liter of water. Note that this is not clean drinking water, neither is it drinking water. It is just water. 43% of the Kenyan population does not have access to a clean drinking water source. 70% of this population is illiterate and lives in a rural context. Let me ask you the real question. How long did you take to fill the glass of water or the bottle of water that you're drinking from today? So as I said earlier, there is a major problem with the water sources in Kenya. I'm going to focus especially on Kenya because this is where this project is taking off, and I am a proud Kenyan, 4th generation to be precise. There are a lot of different sources that are available in urban and rural areas. The graphs on the side will show you improved and unimproved, just to paint a little bit of a brighter picture. Improved sources does not mean that the water is potable. It does not mean that it is safe for consumption according to the World Health Organization standards. And in rural areas, there are a lot of unimproved sources, which includes things like river water, pond, lakes nearby. This is where individuals walk and trek 3 to 4 hours a day to get access to clean drinking water. So if you think about productivity scale, let me do a little bit of a survey here. So how many of you think that you're very, very organized and efficient with your time management skills, and if I gave you 10 assignments to write like 10 papers, you could do it in 3 to 4 hours? Okay, let's say 5 papers, like 1-page papers. 3 to 4 hours if you were to focus on it, right? So if we were to put that into context and say that you can finish 5 1-page response papers in 3 to 4 hours, and this child is still just walking to get water, that wouldn't even last them for a day, is so incredibly outrageous to me. I just don't understand that personally, because I consider myself a little bit more efficient than average, and I could do so much in 3 hours. And I'm so grateful that I don't have to walk 3 hours to get water. And a lot of the times we're all very unaware of the privilege and the opportunities that we have access to. We can just turn on our tap or our faucet and have water. People don't have faucets back home. People don't have that running pipeline supply. It's just a matter of walking. And when it comes to existing solutions, there are a lot in the market. There are things like aquatabs, a lot of chlorine filters, desalination units, but they're so expensive. An average GDP, which is the yearly earning for an average Kenyan, is less than $200. So if we think about how much it costs for a desalination unit to power it just electrically in a month, that's 200,000 Kenyan shillings. That's about $2,000 a month. So if we put that into perspective, it's very, very difficult for people to afford it and to have to keep going into local kiosks to buy chlorine tablets that they cannot afford on a daily basis. So the solution in this case was for me to create a cost-effective water purification unit that's easily accessible by rural communities. At the time of creation of this project, I was a freshman in high school, and the country was drought-stricken. The northern part of the country was drought-stricken, and the coastal regions, which is where I'm from Mombasa, Kenya, was covered in, well, there was a lot of flooding going on. So there was a rampant spread of diseases like typhoid, cholera, tuberculosis, diarrhea because of stagnant waters, pathogens in waters, disease-spreading microorganisms, and such. So I thought, How do we help the country increase its productivity, help kids keep going back to school, ensure that people are attending, their work or their commitments, but then also ensure that they have access to clean drinking water? That's where Matone de Chiwit comes into play, where we use domestically created or domestic and traditional elements for our unit that are available and are already bought on a regular basis for individuals in family contexts. So things like charcoal, they use it to heat their food. That's something that's part of the purification unit. And altogether, it costs less than $20 to create. The throughput time, which is all the elements when the water passes, and also the last element, which I'll walk you through just now, is 5 liters in an hour, which means if we were to take about 8 hours in a day, we can produce about 40 liters of water in a day per family, and it's good for a family of 5. So this is the first stage. The first stage would be gravel, which is the first element, and that separates the leaves and twigs and, just larger impurities in the water. This is mainly aimed for unimproved sources, places like ponds and lakes where there's a lot of these kind of dirty elements. And then you have sand, which is the second element. Sand is to capture the turbidity in much finer elements, and in fact, it takes the longest time to purify. Sand is the element that takes the longest to purify, and it also has large pathogens, or large pathogens can be captured in the sand. The third element is charcoal. So I like to say this is the most controversial element because I've had a lot of questions about why not using activated carbon and why charcoal pieces instead. And the reason why is because using charcoal pieces means that the charcoal is porous, which is what captures the color and the odor from the water. Activated carbon costs about $30 a gram. This costs less than 10 cents for 18 months worth of supplies. The final layer is cotton cloth. So each of these purification layers do have cotton cloth and gauze, but our final layer, the top part of the purification unit, is cotton cloth for any minor impurities or any other parts of the water that have not been purified in the previous elements. And then all the water accumulates in a bucket at the bottom, and I'll show you a diagram of the purification, an actual photograph of the purification unit later on. But it accumulates in a bucket where Moringa oleifera is added. Now, Moringa oleifera is dried seed kernels of drumsticks, not chicken KFC drumsticks, but the plants. Oftentimes they're weeds. They're used. They're removed from a lot of different gardens and farms, but they're very, very effective because they have natural antioxidants that rid the water of pathogens by binding to them, which you can then sieve out. So this is a diagram of these are the couple of purification units that had the opportunity to produce on a mass scale and see whether or not they work qualitatively. So we received a sponsorship from Davis and Shirtlift, which is a water company back home that provides filters to domestic families to see whether or not this would actually work in the rural community. And there were a lot of challenges. This project failed over thrice. There was a lot of challenges that I did face. And there's, with the experimentation process, it's great to hypothesize and keep hypothesizing. But then if it doesn't work in practicality, then you got to go back to the drawing board and figure out the theory. So that was probably the biggest lesson that I learned throughout the process. A lot of the community members, this is Khadija, I donated it to her. We donated one of the units to her, and she was just completely awestruck. She didn't know that this could happen. She was very shocked that you could use natural elements to purify the water. And then she exclaimed after trying a little bit of it, because we did a demo, that it was tamu sana, which in Kiswahili it was very sweet. So it all starts with a drop of water. And the biggest point that I want to draw here is that it's not only about providing access to clean drinking water at one's doorstep, but that means that there's room for people to work with their jobs, get new careers, handle their families, and for children to get an education. And this is the actual aim and hope of this entire mission and our project, is to be able to provide access to basic needs to people around the world in impoverished communities so that they have time to pursue their world desires and their other needs and have families and get jobs. We're also working with a lot of students around the world to raise awareness and conservation efforts, to raise awareness about what we're doing and also ensure that our message is spread out so that they can get involved in the most littlest and the largest of ways. Because we're all just drops in the sea, but one drop makes a million ripples, and that's what it's about, ripple effects. Thank you.